Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the incredibly multifaceted concept of freedom. And we're going to explore some absolutely fascinating sociological and legal research using a very specific location as our real-world laboratory. Picture a beautiful, historic town square nestled in the Basque municipality of Oñati, Spain, the Furuin and Poranza. It's a classic European plaza, right? A place where generations have gathered and where, frankly, everybody kind of knows everybody. Now, we often think of freedom as this simple, static right, something written down on a piece of paper or locked away in a constitution. But as we're about to see through the lens of this particular town square, freedom is actually a living, breathing social construct that shifts dramatically depending on exactly where we're standing, what we're doing, and maybe most importantly, who is watching us. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman has this absolutely brilliant metaphor to frame this. He says, in a sense, freedom is like the air we breathe. We do not ask what this air is unless we are in a crowded, stuffy room and find breathing difficult. Bauman is basically suggesting that freedom is entirely invisible when we have it. We don't walk down the street actively thinking, wow, look at all this incredible freedom I'm experiencing right now. We just walk. We only become conscious of freedom at the exact moment it's restricted. It's like being in a stuffy room. Suddenly, you're acutely aware of the lack of oxygen. The research we're looking at today uses this exact framework to deeply understand how people interact in shared public spaces. And this naturally leads to a deeply personal question, and I want you to keep this in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer today. When was the exact moment you actually noticed the air around you getting stuffy? Think about a time you walked into a public park, a plaza, or a city street and felt that your behavior was being constrained. Was it a police officer standing on the corner? Was it a no trespassing sign bolted to a fence? Or was it simply the judgmental look of a stranger sitting on a bench? Really keep that feeling in mind. To unpack all this, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the air we breathe. Compare the public sphere versus space. Contrast liberty versus freedom. Look at the laws of the square. Gauge the people's perception. And finally, weave together the fabric of freedom. Let's start with the air we breathe and really understanding the suffocation of unfreedom. But to truly grasp that, we need to move right into exploring the public sphere versus public space, the intangible versus the physical. To understand what actually happens in a town square, we've got to untangle two vital yet super easily confused theoretical terms. Consider the public sphere. In sociology and political science, this is totally intangible. It's the realm of ideas, debates, the media, political discourse. It's where public opinion is formed. It doesn't have a GPS coordinate, right? You can't just walk over and touch it. But contrast that with public space. This is the material site. This is the concrete, the grass, the factual physical ground where that political activity actually flows. You can have a thriving public sphere on the internet or in a newspaper, but you absolutely need a physical public space to gather, to protest, or simply to exist alongside your community. Freedom requires a literal, physical place to happen. Next up, let's look at liberty versus freedom and how philosophy actually works in practice. So the absolutely crucial point here is the distinction between an opportunity and an exercise. Liberty provides the opportunity to choose, but freedom is the actual tangible exercise of that choice in a real social setting. Think of liberty like the menu at a restaurant. It represents all the options theoretically available to you without anyone actively stopping you from ordering. But freedom? Freedom is the cash in your pocket to pay for the food. It's the transportation to get to the restaurant, the physical ramps to get inside the building, and the social comfort to sit down and actually eat without feeling totally out of place. You can have all the liberty in the world on paper, but zero actual freedom in practice. The researchers argue that while Western philosophy often obsesses over liberty in the abstract, we really need to pay far more attention to freedom as a lived exercise out there in the real world. With that in mind, let's dive into the laws of the square, mapping this theory directly onto the streets of Oñati. Let's consider Spain's controversial 2015 gag law. This national legislation empowers security forces to limit movement, evacuate spaces, and even dissolve meetings in places of public transit if they believe security is threatened. It sets up this classic constant tension that exists in almost every modern democracy, right? Preserving the general safety and security of the public versus preserving the fundamental right of individuals to gather, protest, and express themselves in a physical space. The law essentially gives the state the power to dictate when the air in the public square gets cut off for the sake of order. And when we map these legal limitations onto the physical square in Oñati, the air gets stuffy very, very quickly. If you want to assemble, you have to navigate the boundaries of that gag law. If you want to engage in commerce or sell goods, you're bound by incredibly strict fairground boundaries and local timetables. You can't just set up a stall and shout to sell your wares whenever you feel like it. If you want to express yourself by putting up a political or social poster, well, local municipal ordinances completely ban this outside of official election periods to preserve the aesthetics and cleanliness of the town. On paper, when you stack the national laws and the local ordinances together, the public square is highly, highly regulated. It's practically suffocating. But how does that compare to the people's perception? Let's look at the town's reality. This is where the research gets incredibly fascinating. The researchers actually went to Oñati and asked the citizens how they perceive their own public square, despite all those laws on the books. And what's really crucial to note about the demographics of this survey is the remarkably high participation rate from women. 58% of the respondents were female. Why does this matter? Because historically and practically, public space is often experienced very differently across demographic lines, especially regarding feelings of safety, access, and judgment. So having such a strong, predominantly female sample here provides a uniquely robust and vital snapshot of true community perception. And the results were completely counterintuitive. Despite the heavy legal restrictions we just reviewed, the sweeping gag law, the strict poster bans, the rigid commercial timetables, an overwhelming 78% of respondents reported genuinely feeling free in their town square. Really think about that for a second. In a space meticulously governed by state and local authorities telling you exactly what you cannot do, nearly 8 out of 10 people say the air feels perfectly fine. How is that even possible? How can a highly regulated space still feel so incredibly free to the people walking through it every single day? Well, here is the big twist, and it's really the core insight of this entire study. The data actually reveals that the people of Oñati feel their freedom is restricted significantly more by society than by the state. Just look at the breakdown. 42 people cited society as the main factor that curtails their freedom, compared to only 27 pointing to the state. In a tight-knit rural town square, you aren't constantly worried about a police officer enforcing some obscure municipal ordinance. You're worried about your neighbors. You're worried about the unwritten social rules. Being observed, dealing with quiet critiques, the fear of gossip, and the total lack of anonymity, that is what truly makes the air feel stuffy. The state might write the laws, but society enforces the actual boundaries of behavior. So, let's bring it all together and weave the fabric of freedom, synthesizing our journey. Synthesizing all of this leaves us with an analytical matrix that proves freedom isn't just some static binary. It's a complex, living, breathing social construct that requires multiple lenses to fully understand. Philosophy defines freedom as the ultimate lack of coercion. The law defines it through strict rights, regulations, and security measures. But society? Society defines freedom by the actual characteristics, actions, and sensations we feel day to day when we step outside our front doors. If the laws on the books don't match the social reality of the town, those laws either become completely ignored, like people putting up posters anyway because the community accepts it, or they become deeply unjust. These core takeaways show us that while the state draws the legal boundaries on a map, it is the social reality of the community that truly determines how much air we have to breathe. First, you just can't exercise freedom purely in your mind. You absolutely need a physical public space to actualize it. Second, legal norms have to align with what the society actually values, or they simply fail to govern how people act. And finally, the context of the space changes everything. In a massive, sprawling city, the pure anonymity of millions of strangers gives you a certain, highly individualistic type of freedom. But in a rural town square like the Florian and Peranza, everyone knows everyone. That constant observation creates a completely different, highly communal environment for how freedom is exercised, negotiated, and ultimately felt. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Taking everything we've unpacked today and placing it right back onto the pavement of your own neighborhood. The next time you walk into your local park, a bustling city plaza, or your town square, take a moment to look around. Who is really deciding what you can and cannot do? Is it the metal signs bolted to the wall, the laws buried in a book, or is it the invisible gazes of the people sitting quietly on the benches? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the air you breathe.